Hey folks, this is a multi-part video. You're looking at part 2 of 3. For part 1, click on the link in the show notes below. Okay, so then we might want to look at the special PDFs, and from my perspective, the next things we're talking about, the PDF derivatives or something like that, or branches are use case specific definitions. Any quote unquote special PDF, we're talking about PDFX, VT, PDFA, and all these kind of things from now on. But any of these special PDFs, and that is an important concept for myself, I think that is worth repeating, is every special PDF is still conforming PDF hands down, right? There's no special reader or viewer or editor needed or something like that. Even if it's a PDFX, a VT, or an E or something like that, it is a PDF, right? And therefore, it is conformant with or compliant to the main track, right? It is a valid PDF.
Yes, absolutely. You're absolutely right, and that's the very important thing and very important message for end users. You don't have to be worried about PDFA, E, VT, whatever it is there. It is still valid and perfectly valid PDF. I would even say that it's more valid than PDF itself because it sets some constraints on some usage. These constraints are very important for the specific industry that this substandard is aiming for, right? So yeah, you're absolutely right. You have perfectly valid PDF, whatever PDF it is.
Okay, so yeah, that should give us a little bit an idea about the nature of this quote unquote special PDFs. That is a description on how to use PDF for a specific use case best, right? I mean, the PDF main track itself, the ISO 32000, the PDF 2.0, is a 1,000 pages document with tons and tons of different features. And now our special PDFs explain how to best use in this particular use case that main PDF, more or less, right?
Yes.
Okay, so I have a list here of all these special PDFs, and we might just want to go through them step by step and see what it is, what is the status, where are they, and obviously, as we just said it, what is the use cases, and therefore I'll ask you at the end of every substandard discussion who should care about it, what's the user perspective, right? Yes. Okay. So first on my list is PDFX. What is PDFX? Where are we with it, and so on?
Yes. So it's interesting with PDFX. It's a format for prepress and print production, and it's a substandard, and it's a subset of PDF. And interesting fact about this is that actually it was born in 2001. So if you remember the dates, that was at the time when PDF was owned by Adobe, and industry itself needed to have some special PDF. So it's not made up by some vendor. This very, very clearly shows the need of specific industries. Print and prepress industry simply needed reliable format for when you're preparing some document that has to be printed or billboard, right? And you prepare it in your own environment on your computer. You send it to the big printer or printing company, and then they print it out, and you would be, surprised how colors look different because, they have some calibration of their machines. You have your own display, uncalibrated and stuff like that. So they needed to be absolutely sure that whatever you see on your computer, you send it out and they print it, you will be satisfied. They were losing money on this. So they decided they need not the full set of PDF features. They needed a substandard where each color will be precisely defined. Of course, they didn't care about stuff like interactive form fields. That was a distraction for them. That was a problem. So they removed that. They said a PDFX file cannot have interactive features. But again, the evolution happened in that industry as well. Now they accept transparency as well. They accept annotations, and so it really is targeted to the printing and prepress. So yeah, I hear a question: when would user care? And
I guess either the user knows it already, or you can forget about it, right? Either you are part of that industry or not, right?
Exactly. Or if you are the average user who is going to print something out in hundreds or thousands of like a leaflet or something, you have your small business and you don't want to use your own laser printer, and you want to send the PDF to a larger printer who is in your town. So you better be sure to save it as a PDFX.
Yeah, that will be a good idea. Maybe the print shop is even asking you to do so, right? They know
Exactly.
have their specifications on how the files have to be delivered, and there might be on that list save as PDFX, right?
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
So you need to care a little bit about it in this case.
Yeah, you need to know, and that's what we're here for, right? You need to know, but you probably do need to know the details, just what it is good for, and in which particular case. And that is a special case here for sure, but you might want to go back to that. Where are we with PDFX? I mean, it's probably the special PDF that goes back the longest time, right? The oldest special PDF in this group here. And yeah, where are we?
That's the oldest one, and with every special substandard or special PDF, it's pretty much the same. So people are starting to use it. Companies are starting to build their own infrastructures around it, and then they decide, well, it's good, we can add something into it, and that's where those small numbers come into play. So you have PDFX 1, 2, 3, 4, and stuff like that. And at the moment, PDFX is being adopted, I guess, into PDFX 6. That's the latest number we have there. And it says that basically the PDFX is based on ISO 32000-2, so the latest one, and it contains some features that previous versions didn't contain, and it's already been released by ISO last year, I guess. I'm not sure, 2000 or even
no, 2020.
2020. Okay, 2020. So that's where we are, and I guess the industry was again the first one to actually adopt substandard based on ISO 32000-2.
Yeah, I agree. It follows trends in the printing industry. There's a cost-sensitive industry, and it's all about automation and stuff like that. And that is also supported by PDFX 6 right now. I guess we do not have to read out the ISO standards number. I just put it on screen here. And yeah, anything else about PDFX that you want to share?
Well, I'm not expert in printing industry, but I noticed that they are definitely adopting things that I didn't expect they would adopt, like optional content groups, for example. And that also shows how even the printing industry is changing, and how, but by the way, who doesn't know what optional content means? It means that you may actually turn something on and off on a paper or on a page under certain circumstances. So when document is being printed, you print out something different than when you zoom it, when you are reading it on a screen with a zoom level of 300 or something, right? So that's some kind of an interactive feature, and I was surprised that they like it. So
they must have their reasons for that.
Yes,
we're both not printing experts, but if there's more questions about PDFX, we'll have our contact information at the end of this podcast episode, as always, and get back to us. We'll figure it out. Definitely. We know where to look it up, right, Roman?
Yeah.
Okay. So, and yeah, if users think that PDFX is something very special, let's talk about PDF VT.
Well, that's a substandard that again is from the area of printing industry, and it's about variable data. So you can imagine you have your mail merge, you have your form, and then you have to enter data from a database. And these processes have to be somehow optimized. You have to, or formalized. You have to know what or how to describe the data when they are going to be printed on this special form. And that's what the standard is all about. It's based on, it's no surprise that this is based on PDFX, because it's going to be printed. And the industry also needed to, like right now, or with PDF VT, which came out in 2010, I guess, or something around that time. And you know, the vendor or the processor has to have the access to the data. So the data have to be there to be printed. And it turns out the industry actually needed to somehow not to expose the data too much. And that's why they came up with the new standard. It's called VCR, Variable Content Replacement. It's a fairly new standard, 2 years old. And it's aimed for, you know, you can imagine that you have your own form and data are coming from a secure location, like a credit card or your ID or something. So you can't really have them there all the time. So they needed some special, you know, treatment of the data, and they came up with their own standard. Well, by they, I mean, I want to say me or we, but the reality is I'm not involved in this print and press standard. So I'm looking at this from a distance, and I'm wondering what the hell is going on there.
Yeah, that's a very special industry. And yeah, VCR is something that I really also didn't have on my radar too much. So we have PDF VT, and I guess that is something like AFP, some people might know as a different format that is an alternative to that. VT is for transactional printing. So you can, for instance, see that you have your template there and you have your data there, and the result is you print an invoice with a specific part on it, or a statement for a specific customer, and that on large scale, right? So a telecoms company sends out like their 15 million statements or invoices every month or something like that. So that is something VT could do when it comes to this sort of data. And when the data that is printed on that, it has more level, more need for security. The example I got from someone is when you print that PIN code letters for credit cards, for instance, right? You cannot like have that PIN codes everywhere, right? It has to be very secret about that. And when you print that, you use PDF VCR, which is just kind of like the secret version of transactional printing.
Yeah, that's a very good example. Yes, the PIN code.
Yeah. Okay. So I promised to have this question at the end of every section. I guess we covered VT and VCR enough. People should know what's the other user perspective for it. Yeah. It is, I guess, good to know what it is, and if you're specialized in that industry, you look into it. If not, you now know what it is, and that you do not need to dig deeper, I guess, right? Okay, so let's get to something that is more prominent, maybe a little bit more spread out across the different industries and verticals. I'm talking about PDF-E, where that E stands for engineering. Tell us a little bit about that, Roman.
Yes. So that standard also came up in 2008, I guess, with the first ISO 32000. The aim is for engineering, as you said, and basically you may look at this as some special type of drawing documents coming from AutoCAD and coming from mechanical industries and engineering industries, and whoever needs to store some drawings, some even 3D models in a PDF, they would use PDF-E, of course. Yeah, I don't want to talk too much in advance, but it was meant to be for archiving of the engineering materials. But then it somehow came up that there are different and better formats for archiving, but they don't have the 3D allowed and so on. So yeah, the evolution of PDF-E, I don't want to say it stopped, but I guess people would now more use PDF-A for archiving as well as use of the engineering stuff, because that's now allowed in PDF-A.
Yeah. So, honestly, Roman, from my understanding, I always felt like, and we haven't talked about PDF-A yet. We'll do it a little later, obviously, but A stands for archiving, and as PDF-E was kind of like meant for archiving PDF-based engineering documents, the decision was made to roll PDF-E into PDF-A, right, into the other standard from the feature that engineering needs. And is it fair to say, from my understanding, it's deprecated? PDF-E stopped at that point and moved on into a different subset of standard. And for those use CAD drawings in 3D in PDF, they might want to look into PDF-A more in the future now?
Yes, that's my understanding as well, and that's my feeling that this is actually a good step, because the purpose of archiving engineering documents is basically the same purpose as archiving in general.
Yeah. So long story short, PDF-E might go away relatively soon and be further developed as part of the archival special standard PDF-A of PDF. And therefore, yeah, case closed. One less, and that is potentially also a good thing, because getting too, let's say, diverse or too branched out might really be too confusing. And therefore, if there's a need for archiving, rolling it all into the archival derivative of PDF sounds like a great idea to me. Okay.
Yes.
Nevertheless, if we want to move on, there's a new guy in town called PDF-R. PDF-R is version 1, and R stands for raster. What else?
Yeah. So the need for this type of document came from scanner manufacturers or device manufacturers. And when you look back like a couple of years ago, the process of scanning documents, where basically you have your own scanner sitting next to your computer and connected with USB, that changed as well. And back then, over the USB, they were flowing data in a form of TIFF or JPEG or some kind of image format. Right now, the processing power of the devices is a lot higher. They don't have to be connected to your computer. They are their own machines. They can even communicate between like large distances. So for example, you might want some scan from a library, and you can access it from somewhere, and that might happen automatically. So whatever now flows over or whatever might flow over the cable isn't just TIFF or JPEG, and then the computer would need to convert it into PDF or something meaningful. right now on the cable, there will be PDF flowing on, and the processing power of the device will be used to produce the PDF. However, we know that the device doesn't have the ability to add some special 3D formats at the moment or something. So it is a substandard that only allows certain things. They cannot make up text. Of course, they can make up invisible text, but the most important thing is the visual appearance in a form of whatever you can call it. Is it still image? And if you encapsulate this image into PDF, you don't have to worry about multi-pages, because PDF already contains a lot of pages, or can contain a lot of pages. Even OCR could be done on the device. Even digitally, you can digitally sign. The device can digitally sign this PDF, so there will be some reliability, and so on and so on. So that's a good thing. It's aimed for producers and manufacturers of the devices, and they are able to produce quality PDF files out of their devices, and they don't need any more processing powers on your computer.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so as far as I understand, the Twain working group, Twain is an interface for scanner to computer, one of some interfaces available. That group approached, if I remember correctly, the PDF Association, right?
Yes.
With that idea to say, we need still compliant, but drilled down subset of PDF that our machines themselves can create with their increased but still limited computational power. And that has to be a PDF, and it has to hold everything that is needed for scanning, which is multi-page plus OCR plus signing, which is also important. In some use cases, you need to sign a scanned document very early to keep the evidence value of the document high. So that is possible on an embedded system. The PDF Association worked with the Twain guys, came up with a specification proposed to ISO. In the meantime, got standardized. That is the way, right? I'm not mixing up history.
Exactly.
Okay.
At that time, and that also shows how PDF Association works. It's no longer some big vendor. It was Twain Working Group that became a license member of PDF Association. They brought this to the table. We discussed it as a community. We thought, well, if they need it, why not? Of course, we provided our support and expertise, and standard is out there. They use it, and it would definitely help their industry as well as ours. Whenever you maybe sometimes in the future would scan over the web environment, that might be through, or there might be use of PDFR.
Yeah. All right. And I guess it's a good example for also representatives from other industries or so having a specific need in PDF. It's a relatively short way to get things done, I'm saying. On the other hand, the community is always involved. So the results should be pretty substantial, pretty reliable in that sense. Okay. PDFR, user perspective, as always. From my point on, let me try and say it. You correct me. User perspective is the user uses the network attached scanner and scans to PDF. Case closed, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, because as always, PDFR is a limited subset, limited down so that an embedded system can deal with it, but it is a full compatible PDF. So what you end up with is you get a PDF. Exactly.
Or you can imagine you have your own big scanner with a USB port, or the SD. You can come there with the SD card. You can come there with the USB, stick, and download the PDF directly from your scanner into your SD card, for example.
Yeah. So good. I guess that's it for PDFR. Again, users just scan to PDF and just wonder how smooth and nice it works. And that might be the reason, because it is PDFR, but guess that's all people need to know about that. If they are not a scanner manufacturer, then talk to us. We have more information, obviously.
Yeah.
Now, I guess we're approaching a specific or special PDF called PDF-A that, from my perspective, has a much bigger footprint out there, and that a lot of users, more than special niche like Up and So Far, will or at least should care about, I guess.
Yes. Well, PDF-A is definitely one of the better showcases of PDF substandard. It's very successful, definitely. And it also somehow entered the area of regulations and or opened up maybe for PDF bunch of companies, bunch of public like government institutions require PDF-A. So they have their own regulations, their own standards, so to speak, for accepting PDF files from out there. Mm-hmm. And yeah, Library of Congress, one of the good examples. They would accept only PDF-A. And yeah, well, we didn't mention that. PDF-A stands for archiving. So whatever you need to archive for a long, long time, you would rather use PDF-A than just standard PDF, because the PDF-A is designed in a way that whatever is needed for rendering, reliable rendering, is inside of the PDF. Mm-hmm. So if a font is needed, it has to be there. If a color interpretation is needed, it has to be there. If you open the file in a 20, 100, 200 years, I'm not saying you would end up with the same result, because you probably would show it or would render it in a different device. But whatever is needed to replicate the behavior that we have now, or in the time of creating that file, is going to be in that file. So it's very important. And I always get a question, why is that needed? Doesn't PDF itself have it? Because that's the, kind of like the core proposition of PDF. And to be fair, no, PDF doesn't have it. PDF is just a container for a lot of different data. And sometimes you may enter in PDF data that are not reliable from a long-term preservation. Mm-hmm. We, at the moment, everybody does have Times New Roman font on their computer. So it looks like it is reliable to say only render something with Times New Roman. But in 20 years, 100 years, nobody knows what the fonts will look like, if fonts will ever existed. But PDF-A makes sure that all the glyphs, all the informations around the font, all the matrices are inside of the PDF. So you can't really, or even in 200 years, you would be able to write a piece of code that would replicate today's PDF reader behavior.
Yeah, and therefore there have to be precautions taken. The main track PDF 2.0 these days has all the options, let's say, and all the options are needed for this and that. But when it comes to archiving, again, PDF-A standard, its nature is how to use PDF in a secure way for archiving. And that might mean that you do not use a specific feature that might be able to change the content you present over time by applying a formula or something like that. Mm-hmm. You would not want to have that things in your archive, and therefore this is like a recipe where it is written down: use PDF in this and that fashion. Do this. This is mandatory. Don't ever do that. This is forbidden, or it is suggested to do it this way. That is the nature of how the PDF-A subset standard is written. It's out there since 2005, so very mature in the meantime. Current version is?
PDF A4, which is based on the PDF PDF 2.0 or ISO 32000-2, and so the new PDF, and also it contains the 3D capabilities we were talking about while we touched the PDF E standard as well. So yes, very mature. It does have a lot of different, they call it, or we call it flavors. Mm-hmm. So we have PDF A1, PDF A2, PDF A3, now PDF A4, and each of these come with flavors. PDF A1A. Yep.
Let's talk about that flavors in a second, because this sparks a question to me. Puts in my mind a question that I very often get. So when you guys do archiving, how can you have versions like PDF A1, PDF A2, and do I need to go back now that PDF A4 is out and convert my old PDF A1 files into PDF A4 to keep them up to date? Or what is this with the versions? Isn't it contradicting the archival paradigm?
Yes, I completely agree with you. It is confusing, and you have to really understand what you're doing. On the other side, on the other hand, you have to also understand that archiving, there's no just one archive, right? So sometimes if you are archiving static documents, it's okay to archive a paper. But if you need to archive some animations or something, it's not really, you can't really store it on a paper. So yeah, there are a lot of different needs when it comes to archiving. Some of the constraints that were important at the beginning when PDF-A came up are no more issues, I would say, and some other issues are or came up, right?
With the evolving main track of PDF, right?
Yes, yeah, exactly. Back in 2005, we didn't care about archiving of accessible documents that much. We care about that quite a lot now. We didn't care about 3D. I use it quite often because the 3D example, because that actually shows how different we see, or how differently we see documents now and back then, when it was a static piece of paper.
Yeah, when we started with PDF-A back in 2005, we were always using this analogy to, it is like electronic paper, right? Almost like you write a document and you edit it and you change it, and then you kind of like freeze it in that way, in that version, and by printing in the old days, or by converting it to PDF-A/electronic paper when we started to use that. But that's no longer the reality of how documents look like, right? Still, you need to archive them. So PDF-A needs to evolve. And just want to summarize it again for everybody listening here. It is not versions of the standard, and but it's parts, right? So PDF-A1 contains a certain definition of how to secure and save use that version these days of PDF in archiving. And if you have a PDF-A1 document, it's a perfect, valid archival PDF. It's a perfect compatible PDF nevertheless, but or for sure as well, but there is no need to ever change that. It's an archival artifact, and it is static, it is frozen, it is safe in that sense that it will render on any particular computer in any particular future, far future maybe. And organizations with retention schedules of forever, like the archives, the libraries, and so on, even they gave their go on this standard. So for everybody out there, it's safe to use, no need to change. And the quote unquote versions are parts. And when you go from PDF-A1 to PDF-A2 to PDF-A3 and now PDF-A4, since the end of last year, It is looking at higher version numbers of the main track standard, for instance, looking at all the new introduced features of PDF 2.0, and then again judging how to use them securely in the archival use case. And therefore, obviously, there needs to be a new part of the standard describing that new additions to PDF and how they are used in archiving. So that's the way I explain it.
Yes, yeah, well, good job. Definitely better job. You did better job than I did.
No.
Yeah.
That's not what I meant. But again, I'm talking to users all the time. And this is a question that comes up again. So it was important for me to clarify there's no old PDFA or new PDFA. There's just a PDFA conforming to a certain part of the standard. And all PDFA is good PDFA and meant to last, right? And not going away. But you brought up something else when I totally distracted your train of thought there. That was about the conformance levels or the flavors, as you put that. Another level of big confusion, I guess, out there for users. All of a sudden, there had been a PDFA, let's say, -2, which is the second part of the standard, and then little U in the end as a flavor, or a B or an A. And with PDFA 4, that's going away. But before we talk about what is future, quickly sort it out. What is A, B, and U, and what is good for?
Yep. Okay. So you rightly said that the PDFA -1 and -2 were based on different standards of PDF. PDFA 1 was based on 1.4, PDFA 2 was based on 1.7. That means new features of PDF 1.7 have to be adopted. By new features, I mean images in JPEG 2000, for example, or open types, or digital signatures, and so on and so on. That means there was a big step forward, although the nature of the archival document didn't change. And then those flavors, yeah, that's kind of confusing. You see PDF A2A, PDF A2B, PDF A2U, and then you think, well, if there's a B, why not C? And B is better than A? Well, no, it's worse than that. PDF A means PDF A2 flavor A means accessibility. So you may have PDF A file, archival file, and you may claim that this file is also accessible. So it does have all the structure inside it. And that's what the small a is. If you look at the PDF A2B, it means binary, I guess. So that's the...
Never really figured that one out. It's just B.
It's just B, okay. It's the cheapest one. So you don't have to do too much to produce it. And that means you don't have or it's not guaranteed that you would have the access to Unicode values of the fonts. So you see the document as you would see it on a paper. For printing, it's all good. But when you have to extract data from that file, select and copy out and paste in your favorite viewer, like Foxit Reader, for example, then you don't have the guarantee that these Unicode values would be there. That's why we have PDF A2U. U stands for Unicode. So yeah, a lot of different flavors. I guess, or for me, I always try to explain this for end users. You should not care the good processor, the good reader or editor, PDF editor you have, should recognize what is inside of the PDF and should tell you, well, this file you cannot save as PDF A because something is missing there. So I think it's up to us, again, developers, vendors, to hide these confusions in our products for end users. On the other hand, you can't really do that because some regulations, some public sector, government requires some specific PDF-A to you. So you have to make sure as a vendor that your user understand that it creates a complying file with that standard. So they are safe, basically. Right? Yeah. I completely agree. There's a lot of confusion. End users are confused. My friends who don't know anything about a PDF, they would be like, well, I have no idea. And I would say, well, you shouldn't care, right? But they have to care at some point. Because they have to set something on the save as dialog.
Yeah, I remember the times when we were at trade shows explaining what is A, B, and U to end users. But I guess it's a clear case of over-engineering maybe at this point. And with PDF-A4, that went away. A PDF-A4 now either has tags for accessibility. We'll talk about that later a little bit, but either it has or it doesn't. But it has no small conformance level attached to that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it made things easier by dropping the 3 levels and or not, because PDF-A4 now all of a sudden, from my perspective, it's a confusing step, introduces 2 new little characters in the end, right? There's PDF-A4F and PDF-A4E.
Yes. Yeah.
What is it?
Yeah. Well, you're right. We got rid of some of the confusion and we introduced some new ones. I'm kind of undecided on this level. I would think that we should make things a lot easier for people, not for us. And these conformance levels are more for, or as I see it, more for companies and vendors, not for end users. Mm-hmm. I would rather see one PDF-A that would contain everything, and then let the processor decide what's the best for the document or for the use case that the document is meant to.
Yeah, I almost feel like PDF-A4F with that little F. Mm-hmm. Is like a stamp put on it because some people think that concept is not good from the get-go, because that F stands for files, I guess, attached files. So PDF-A usually should be, as you introduced, self-containing. Everything that renders is in there, that is needed for rendering is in there. It's a stable format. It renders everywhere. And then PDF-A3 introduced the concept of embedding, like PDF always can, but also embedding arbitrary file formats like a Word file or something like that into a PDF-A. And some of the archivists were like all over it, saying that's not a good idea. We should not do that, because it opens up a door where a non-archival ready part of that PDF-A file is going into an archive, for instance, that Word document. Others said, it's a great idea because I do have a Word file from a word processor that I keep on editing, and I do it, and I embed it with a PDF-A rendition of a certain version of that, and say, oh, I freeze it in that level, but I embed the original file, and later on I can keep working with that original file, create a new version again, right? And or work on it any further. So it's a big discussion between purists from the archiving community and people more looking at workflows as well, maybe from the industry side. I don't know whether that is the border between the two groups discussing here, but there's definitely two trends going on around whether or not to allow attaching arbitrary file formats into a PDF-A file. And that's why I feel when you have a PDF-A4F, it clearly says, well, there is an embedded file that is not PDF-A compliant in this file. Yeah. Fair to say?
Yeah, agree with your summary as well. I mean, I always, and it also summarized nicely the thinking that we had or people had during the development of all the PDF-A formats and standards. You forgot to mention that at some point there was in PDF-A3 there was or A2 it was, you could actually have embedded files, but it had to be PDF-A compliant file.
Yeah.
So yeah, as you start, thinking this through, and as people from different industries are starting to use and adopting this format, they come up with some interesting use cases you at the table have no idea about, and you can't really come up with these ideas unless you are already in that industry pretty deeply. And that's why all these sub-standards are there. That's why the evolution might be even more dramatic on these sub-formats than in the main PDF document. And I think it's a good thing, to be honest, because those ideas are shaping our future. Whatever we can do, we will do, and whatever we can even scratch as a bad idea. If we don't have these ideas on the table, if we don't consider them, then we are living in our own bubble and we can't really meet the needs of the real world examples. So
yeah. And while I understand the case of the archivist in this discussion here saying they're purists and say everything has to be archive ready and we cannot allow something inside an archive ready artifact that is in a different flavor, different format, non-archive ready, like an original source file or something like that. I also understand the concept from the other perspective, because the other group, for instance, and I got invited by the German government a couple of years ago to discuss the use of PDF for electronic invoicing, right? The initiative called Zugpferd auf Deutsch, but Zugpferd as you say in English. And the concept of that is you have an invoice in PDF, and obviously the visual representation, that invoice itself should be archive ready. So it has to be PDF-A. I think it's a great idea. On the other hand, the invoice should be machine readable. And that means the invoice data could be structured into an XML file. And that's exactly how they did it. And now there's a great idea to say, okay, we use a PDF-A compliant PDF invoice and attach a non-PDF-A attachment, an arbitrary file form, in this case, an XML file, into that file for a machine readable use case, right? Or importable use case. And therefore, I guess there is definitely a case for, and you said, special interest group in this particular case, but very valid use case to say, we need to combine an archive-ready PDF with a contained other file format. And that is nowadays PDF-A4 small f in the end. We'll put it on screen so that everybody can read it. PDF-A4F. Okay, other than that, a PDF-A4 is a PDF-A4, and we don't have any conformance levels. We just stamp it when it contains another file format attached or embedded into that PDF. Okay, and then there is PDF-A4E. We heard about E before, right? PDF-E.
Yeah, PDF-A4E, yes. Yeah. I'm starting to lose track of characters and numbers in PDF. Yes, that's a special flavor that addresses the needs of PDF-E. So we were talking about engineering and how they need actually to archive their own drawings and 3D models and everything around this industry. And we try to address this by using PDF-A4E, which is the small e there. And this one actually allows embedding 3D models as well. So I guess I see this as a replacement of PDF-E in a longer run, maybe in a very short run, to be honest.
It's published, right?
Yes, it was published, but let's see how industry will adopt it.
Oh, yeah. Correct. Yeah.
So
so now we did exactly what we always suggest not to do, because we talked about all the different kind of small things in there with the risk of confusing or shying away people from it. But okay, so probably somebody fast forwards until exact this moment when we say, what's the user perspective on PDF-A as such? I guess this is one of the special PDFs, let's say, that people should concern themselves with, right?
Yes, definitely. I mean, if I look at the average user, average home user or small business users, you have your own small business and you want to store your invoices, your accounting materials, not in a paper, but somewhere on a drive or in your, it's not maybe safe, but let's say your Google Drive or somewhere else, then I'd suggest you to use PDF-A definitely, because that's something what actually you can be sure that you open this document in 2, 3, 4 years and your accounting numbers will be there. All the numbers, everything will be there. Yeah. So this is something what even average user should care about. I'm absolutely sure. And not talking about larger businesses or larger corporates and companies and organizations, whatever you want to store somewhere. I don't know where people store these days data, if not in cloud. I guess people are not using CDs anymore. But if you do want to store, save, archive your digital materials, use PDF-A. That would be a very strong recommendation.
Yeah, and here's a small selection that even the small user, home user, can do. For instance, if you use your Microsoft Word environment to save as or export to PDF-A, there's a way to just check a little mark box, and then it's PDF-A and no longer just the normal PDF for storing it on the long run. I guess we'll talk to when our German listeners will be like, oh, old story, old news here, because Germany is kind of like a best practice country by nature. Widely adopted PDF-A, not only in government, not only large organizations, but almost everywhere. It's kind of like the best practice for storing or archiving PDF files, but thus they do, right? Use PDF-A. It's not the cost argument or the argument, am I forced to do this by regulation, which is somewhere going on, but not everywhere. That is secondary here. In the Netherlands, they have this interesting comply or explain rule. Either you save your documents as a larger company or as a government organization to PDF-A, or you better have an explanation on why you couldn't, right? So that is the default there is PDF-A. In the US, not so much, I guess. There is definitely larger organization taking care of long-term archiving and so on, not only very well aware, but also mandating PDF-A. There has been this new rule came out by NARA, I guess, about how to deliver PDFs in PDF-A format and so on for very long-term archiving. And I guess not looking into PDF-A, really shame on you, because think about that concept of the digital dark age. How much and how many information will get lost over time because it's just not well maintained. And for PDF, it's so easy. Just save to PDF-A if you have any means of storing your document for a longer time, right?
Yes. Yeah, I cannot agree more. If you're not scared about regulations, you should be scared about the loss of data or loss of access to your data, because the data will be still there, of course, but you won't be able to access them.
Yeah, or worst case, it changes and you don't even recognize that it changes, right?
Yes.
Because, and not saying PDF is bad or a bad practice or a bad idea or something like that, but PDF can do everything. And if you need to store long-term, care about that, use A, how to use it correctly in the archiving use case, right? And yes. Then it will be safe and sound, worry-free almost, to have your PDFs look the same all the time, right? Okay, yeah. Anything else on PDF-A? I guess, again, it's the most important special PDF use case, or most commonly spread across different industries, special PDF?
Well, there's not much to add to that, just that it's so common that there is really no excuse for not using it. Of course, some worse products or tools are not supporting it, but that's again not an excuse. Almost every single processor can save files as PDF-A. Good tools are able to validate PDF-A files and so on. So yeah, I don't see an excuse for not using it.